Here we go. It is Hot Sheet Game Face on right now. It is from Baseball America. You're on the YouTube channel or you're listening on the pod. And also make sure you get yourself a BA subscription. Subscribe to all the awesome content and support it that Baseball America has put together for many years. BAs, JJ Cooper and Jeff Ponce joining us right now. Do you see that, Jeff? Game Face ready for JJ Cooper? I feel like he's ready to go today.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, so
he had the full game face on. He borrowed that from Jack Lambert, I'm sure.
Okay, well then let's do this. First move, let's hit it. Okay, so if you are chasing history, the wrong side of history, as one of the worst teams in baseball history, baseball's been around for a really long time. That's what the White Sox are doing right now, okay? We'll see what their loss total ends up being. And they not tried, but they did a couple things in the offseason this year, right? They signed a few guys that they were able to flip. Well, apparently they're not going to really be into that too much. So here's the quote from Chris Getz, their general manager, the other day. We're not going to be working heavily in free agency. We've got guys on the field right now who need to improve their game. So if you're a fan or if you're someone like me and you're just trying to read between the lines, you're like, so, okay, I get it. You weren't going to sign Corbin Burns or Juan Soto this offseason. They'd have never signed a player for $100 million or more anyway. But JJ, how do you get out of this in timely fashion?
So, okay, I just want to break that quote down a little bit. I don't understand it. And I guess the reason I don't understand it, I'm just kind of thinking of it almost from a media critic standpoint first, which is the last thing I want to tell White Sox fans right now is, hey, good news, guys. This lineup you're looking at, we're expecting it to get better. Because this lineup is, when I say historically bad, this lineup is averaging 3.1 runs per game. That is the worst in a full 162 game season in the DH era. There's no team worse in the last 50 plus years. And if you look at this lineup, there's not like you say, oh, okay, but this is, I looked at it from a war perspective. There are two lineups that were worse than this in the last 50 years, 79 A's, 77 Braves. But the 79 A's, that's a 20-year-old Ricky Henderson. That's a 24-year-old Dwayne Murphy who's on his way to, his gold glove center fielder. Tony Armas, 25-year-olds in the outfield. You have promise there. You look at that 77 Braves team. It's got Gary Matthews. It's got Dale Murphy. Those were two of the youngest. Those teams were two of the youngest lineups in baseball. They were second youngest in each of those years. That was a hope for promise for the future. This is a White Sox lineup that is dead average as far as lineup age. You say, okay, well, what are the young stars? There are only 4 players under the age of 25 who've gotten at bats for this team. And none of them are like, okay, that's a cornerstone guy going forward. This is not a team that you can say, oh, no, we're going to build from within. The pitching side, they've done some good things. They got Eric Fedde before they shipped him, out in a trade. Garrett Crochet's had a good year. There's some things there to be hopeful about. There are some pitching prospects on the way. But if this is a team that says, hey, we're going to build from within on the lineup side, we only have 3 players in their top 10 who are position player prospects. Colson Montgomery, we got Edgar Cuero's a catcher who's not far away, and you got Brian Ramos. But that's it. And this is not a team. There were only 2 guys in their AAA lineup, position players, who are under the age of 25. This is not a team that is saying, no, wait, we've got a lot on the way. They don't have as much on the way as the teams in their own division who have better younger hitters than they do at the big league level and at the minor league level.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about how they're going to be limited in the draft too, that they kind of pick the worst time in history to sort of tank. If this had happened 10 years ago, they're guaranteed the number 1 pick. And you say, all right, there's some talent coming out next year, Jace Lavalette, whoever that might be. There might be some position help coming on the way. You look at that, you factor that into the puzzle. And then you look at a guy like Colson Montgomery, who very good player, I think has a lot of good attributes, could still be an average or better MLB player. He's really struggled at the AAA level this year and, has not produced even in terms of AAA measures and, age-based measures, has really not produced in the way that I think anybody hoped that Colson Montgomery could produce. We haven't heard of, any phantom injuries or anything that's been nagging him. It's just been, an underwhelming season all around. So I think if you're a White Sox fan, unfortunately, outside of, Noah Schultz and some of, as you mentioned, the pitching that's coming up, some of the pitching that's already here, there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of relief in sight. And then when you hear from, those in the brass and the organization saying, no, we're not going to commit to making this team any better next year, it's a really scary proposition, and one where I don't know who the savior is going to be. I don't think that there is a Christian Campbell or a young Ellie De La Cruz or someone along those lines that's floating around in the lower minors of this organization at present.
Whew. Anything good? Anything positive about what we're seeing here right now? Any signs of life? I've got one.
Okay.
Want to hear it?
Sure.
They're in my mind, JJ, the division that it is easiest to make up ground in quickly. Look at the Royals from last year, spending just some money, and then all of a sudden, and I know they have Bobby Witt and there's other pieces there, I get it, but spending some money and then suddenly becoming a playoff team. The AL Central is kind of looked at as the weakest spot, right? The weakest link in Major League Baseball if you're looking from a year-to-year basis. So maybe the rebuild only takes 5 years instead of 10 if they were in the AL East.
Okay, the counter argument on that is that every other team in the AL Central is still, as we talk right here in mid-September, has a shot at the playoffs. Every other one. So, if you look at it, the Tigers are better than the White Sox, and they're younger than the White Sox. The Royals are better than the White Sox, and they're younger than the Guardians are better than the White Sox, and they're younger than the White Sox. The Twins are about the same age, but they have better prospects. I would say overall their farm system's a little better, and they have more young guys. You look at the rookie rotation that the Twins kind of have been taking their lumps with a little bit this year. That should have a payoff down the road. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like, Chris Getz, ascended to this role and it all fell apart, because this is the White Sox kind of system that's kind of been heading in this direction. But I also think you on the pitching side, if I was going to try to find a positive on the pitching side, if you told me that there are the makings of a solid rotation and bullpen here, I can see that. I could buy that. It's going to take its lumps. It's going to take some time, but I do think that that's possible. If you say on the position player side, no, we're going to build from within on the position player side, you're going to have to trade some of this pitching to improve the position player side, because I cannot map out for you. Maybe you can, Jeff, but I can't map out a lineup that of homegrown players. And I say, okay, this is the team that can win in 25, 26, or 27.
Yeah, I don't think you can. And, I think that the only way they're going to make big gains is if there's, catastrophic changes on the player development side, particularly when it comes to hitting, because they've brought in talented players over the last 10 years. They've had top 10 picks. They've brought in Andrew Vaughn. They brought in Nick Madrigal. A lot of these guys just simply haven't worked out. We haven't seen hitters go to Chicago and improve. And it's not like it's, some fortress or some canyon of a park. They're not playing in the Polar Grounds. They're not playing in San Francisco. It's not a park that's going to sap power or, sap offensive production. We should be seeing more from where they've selected and just the amount of young players they've brought in. Even we can go back as far as the Chris Sale trade. We've really never seen the returns on a Yoan Moncada. And I think this is the kind of organization, as we start to see some of these players matriculate to other organizations, as we have with Eloy Jimenez, we're going to start to see them probably improve and start to maybe blossom into maybe not the players we thought they were going to be, but at least better versions of what we saw with the White Sox. And I think that's a really scary proposition. And then one last thing on the Central, I actually would argue that it might be the most improving division in the game right now. You look at the Guardians, it's the best team or one of the best teams in baseball. The Twins are young and they still have a really good farm system. I think that they've refined some things in the pitching side just in terms of identification. We've seen a lot of those guys come up. They're willing to spend some money. The Tigers seem to be turning a corner in a real way as they've changed the regime and brought in some very smart people from the Dodgers organization, et cetera. I think we're starting to see across all levels the development happening in a way that didn't happen. This is very reminiscent of those Al Avila sort of Tigers teams that maybe had some pitching and it just never came together. Unfortunately, you need the pitching to win, but I don't think that you can build around it because there's just from year to year injuries and all the other bumps and bruises that you're going to deal with as a pitcher. It's just tough to sort of bank on a couple of arms. It's really unfortunate where we're at right now with the White Sox, considering it's a major market team and, a fan base that I think, a few years ago kind of thought they were on the cusp of a potential run, and it just never came to fruition. It's mismanagement, frankly.
That's the other thing that's tough to kind of look at here when we talk about the position players, when we talk about the big league level. The other reality, the other kind of autopsy that has to be done is why did most of these position players, Eloy Jimenez was probably better as a White Sox, right when he came up to the big leagues than he was as he got more established in his big league career. Luis Roberts been injuries more than anything, but Yohan Moncada hasn't gotten any better. Andrew Vaughn hasn't gotten any better. Like, you have a lot of players who have come up. Nick Madrigal didn't get any better. You have a lot of players who came up to the big leagues, and it's a struggle to say that these players continue to get better. Normally, a player who's a competent player in the big leagues as a 22, 23-year-old is an even better player as a 24, 25, 26-year-old. We haven't seen that a lot with the White Sox lately.
Yeah, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take you in a completely different direction in terms of organizations. We're going to take you to one that has, I would say, fewer flaws, to be fair, for topic number 2 on leadoff, and well done on all of that. I think it was much needed. We've done it a ton on foul territory, but to get also the Baseball America farm system perspective does make it even more concerning for White Sox fans, and it's worth pointing out. I mean, this team's not in it, obviously, but they're setting records in the wrong way, and it does not look like a bright future right now either. Okay, so for the Dodgers, that's where I want to go next. This is a team that's a playoff team. They, quote, won the offseason by signing all of these players. It's a fun team to follow. They win the division just about every year over the past decade plus. There was one year where they didn't, and they barely missed to the Giants. So the problem at hand is pitching injuries. And JJ, I wanted to bring this up because Ken Rosenthal wrote about it yesterday after we saw Tyler Glasnow go down. It seemed like it was kind of nothing. We almost joked that maybe it was a phantom IL situation because he was getting towards his career high innings in the major leagues. And he even spoke lightly of it. Then all of a sudden you hear, nope, it's going to take longer, setback, elbow strain, essentially done for the year. So Andrew Friedman has been open about this lately. He runs baseball operations there. They need to do some soul searching with their pitching in the offseason. Do you agree? Do you think we've hit a point from a numbers perspective where data is showing Dodgers pitching injuries piling up more than most? There's some other teams high on that list, but more than most?
I would say, for good and bad, is kind of what they're chasing. They're chasing high risk, which is the Dodgers want to have the hardest throwers with the best breaking balls, with the best ability to miss bats, right? Which those are logical things to chase. Those are logical things to go to. Ken noted in his story, we had a piece last year at Baseball America about how the AA Tulsa rotation was the hardest throwing rotation in baseball. And basically, if you look at that rotation, which was drawing raves, most of that rotation's hurt now. They're not the only team facing this. The Braves chase stuff, and the Braves have had a slew of arm injuries, especially if you look at players that they've drafted. I would say that these are teams who have been willing to take on more risk to try to basically win big. It's taking big swings on a pitching side to see how it works out. And some years you get what you got from the Braves got from Spencer Strider last year, and some years you get Spencer Strider missing the year like he is this year. Walker Buehler had already been hurt when the Dodgers drafted him. Walker Buehler has had a great run, then he got hurt again, and he's struggling to get back to that. It's a tough balance because the Dodgers want to have aces, fronting the rotation in the postseason, pitching out of their pen in the postseason. And if everyone stays healthy, they can. But now this is the second year in a row. This is a year where, having run out of pitching last year, the Dodgers did everything in their power, it felt like, to try to go overboard on pitching depth this year. And here we are in mid-September, and we don't know what their rotation is going to look like come October.
Yeah, and I mean, credit to them for the, how well they've done in terms of identification on the pitching side. But, the other part of the double-edged sword is there's so many of these guys that have been injured. But I mean, you look at their IL and effectively they have more or less, 2 full rotations with Glasnow, Gonsolin, Kershaw, May, River Ryan, Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone, and Nick Frasso and Kyle Hurt, though I know the last 2 names I mentioned are probably more likely to be relief pitchers, but guys that did start at certain points in time. It's great that they're consistently targeting players that have big stuff and have these really high ceilings, but the ability to keep these guys healthy and get 150 innings out of these arms just has not happened. And I think that's concerning as someone who kind of grew up as a Dodgers fan and loosely sort of still follows the organization somewhat. It is the most frustrating thing every year going into October, knowing that you have this stacked lineup that's as good as any in the game. And you have just this, cornucopia almost of keeping it fall there of just hurt pitchers. And we didn't even bring up Shohei Ohtani, who could potentially factor into the mix next year. And I think that's the concern is from year to year, even though they have so much talent and they look so great on paper, I think the big question is how many of these guys are going to throw 150 innings? Do we have 5 or 6 starters here that can give us 130 innings even? Because I think when you get into, Glasnow and some of these guys, Bueller now coming back from, second Tommy John, et cetera, it's just very uncertain. And we just don't know if the stuff will ever fully come back for some of these players. And if they're ever going to be able to, consistently take the ball and go 5 to 6 innings 30 times a year. That is such a big differentiator between teams that do win titles and those that don't, is getting, a healthy starting rotation and having enough, average or better major league arms and a couple guys that are, ace caliber or number 2 caliber at the top of your rotation. And I think it's another concern going into the playoffs as we go into the last few weeks of the season once again for the Dodgers.
The other thing that I do want to kind of point out with this is there was a peer-reviewed scholarly study that looked at this recently. I'm planning to try to write on this more at Baseball America in the near future, that said, okay, we're going to look at major league pitchers and then try to see what are the differentiators between which guys go on the injured list the next year compared to this and try to match them and all. And what they found is at the big league level, workload doesn't really play a part in this now. Like we are at a point where there is no such thing as the overworked pitcher who goes on the IL. Almost, it's basically doesn't exist anymore. The 2 most obvious factors that led to further, increases in injury rates, increases in time on the IL is fastball velocity and the power in which you threw your breaking ball, right? If you threw a hard fastball, but you threw a softer breaking ball, that lowered your risk. Well, the tough thing about this is when you said, okay, well, what's the Dodgers' common thread line here? They go for pitchers who throw hard and spin a nasty breaking ball. And I can't tell you that that's something where you're saying, okay, well, what we want to go doing going forward is find pitchers who throw not as hard and don't spin as nasty a breaking ball, because that's the guys you want to have. That's the guys who are most effective, but there is a durability risk that does come with that.
So what's the solution here? Because it's hard to say that they're failing. I mean, it's World Series or bust for a team like them. They've won 1. That was during the COVID year. And actually, it applies quite a bit to this conversation because you didn't have a marathon season to get through. Part of the problem is, here we are. What does their rotation and their depth look like right now versus what it looked like in April? So what is the solution, last part here, JJ, for them? Do they need to start blending in some other goals in terms of who they are scouting and who they are developing to make sure that they counter it with some guys that are lower on the injury risk scale?
I think that they'll probably at least look at that, but at the same time, and again, I do think that there is potential of finding, hey, it's not like that there's only one way to get a hitter out. There are ways to, to mix pitches, to move pitches in and out, deception, all that. But all that being said, I do think that those are the guys I just described are usually not the guys. Those are the guys that you would describe as number 4 starters. If you're talking about starting pitcher, maybe a number 3. The Dodgers are looking for guys who confront a playoff rotation, be a number 2 in a playoff rotation. I think they'll go back to the drawing board, but I think also they're the Dodgers, so they may just say, you know what? Okay, next year we got to have 10 starting pitchers we can depend on, and we know that we'll have 4 of them at the end of the year. They can spin their way out of problems that most teams can't.
Exactly. You can buy your way out of problems that most teams
Yeah.
can't. And that matters here, right? You always say, hey, you think you have enough starting pitching, and then you don't. It just happens to be the case, especially with the Dodgers lately. But good combo there. Great points. We're going to keep going through some prospect highlights and lowlights in a moment, but let's step aside for a quick second and give a quick shout out to a sponsor to this Baseball America Hot Sheet show, and that is Lumen. We would like to introduce you to an amazing tool to help increase energy levels and feel better in your body, lose weight, and really to maintain healthy weight. So Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health based on the context of your breath measurement. I actually brought one this time. So comes in this cool box right here. I'm not going to do the entire demo right now, although maybe we continue that sometime in the future and can make that its own video. But here it is. It's nice and small. You take this off, and then you will test yourself with your metabolic level once you set it up with your phone, which I have done already. I have the app. You can see also below, if you want more information, you can scan the QR code on your screen. But it does give you recommendations in terms of nutrition, and you can measure where you're at with your breath before and after workouts. They have logged 55 million metabolic measurements, and they are the leading experts on metabolic health. So their recommendations are science-backed and personalized to your measurements. So you know that you're doing what's best for your body. And there you can see some good examples on how Lumen works and how that app works. So you breathe into Lumen first thing in the morning. You can do it pre-workout, pre-meals, etc., and see where you're at with your metabolism. It shows where you're at on the meter. Are you burning carbs? Are you burning fat? And then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. So scan the QR code on your screen. Super cool too. It's very smooth, the app, the whole way that it works. Use the code HOTSHEET, HOTSHEET, for 15% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me. That's the website. And use the code HOTSHEET for 15% off. Start taking charge of your health today. It's a great way to do it. It's super easy. Setup takes like 2 minutes. Go check it out. All right, we're back. Let's start with Carson Williams in the Tampa Bay Rays system. Because, hey, Jeff, the Rays essentially sold a lot at the deadline, right? And decided this wasn't going to be the year for them. Although, I mentioned the other day, could make the case that they might have been involved in a wild card race with the way the Twins have been crap in the bed for a while now. But anyway,
the whole AL.
Yeah, exactly. There is an open spot there. I mean, Twins should take it, but the Tigers and Mariners are making a little late noise. Could have been the Rays too. But anyway, they decided to sell and to reload for next year. And Carson Williams is a big part of the future. So tell us what you guys have been writing about with him.
Yeah, I think it all really starts with Carson Williams as a no doubt shortstop, one of the better defenders in the minor leagues. I think when you see this guy play short, big arm, really smooth out there, there's no questions that he's going to fit into that role long term. And I think for a team that is looking for their next shortstop, it kind of makes sense. There's always been power. There's always been on base ability. The hit tool's been a bit of a question. The contact, we've seen incremental improvements over the last couple of years, but in a lot of ways, I think, Williams is a player that's going to sort of fit into the modern sort of ball player archetype of a guy that's going to run, double digit sort of percentage walk rates, 10, 11, 12%, run a higher OBP. There will be some strikeouts that come with it, but there's 25 home run upside here in the major leagues. I think there's 20 plus steal upside. This could be a 2020 guy who provides really good defense and is a really valuable player. I don't think he's going to be, selling a whole lot of t-shirts are going to be on your billboards. But a guy that, when we look back, has a really, really strong, 10, 12, 13-year major league career where he's just done everything really well on both sides of the ball and put up really big WAR numbers. I think this is kind of the perfect player when it comes to those WAR scores in terms of playing a really high value position and playing it really well, takes a lot of walks and hits for power and has that impact. So I think this is a player that could potentially be in the mix next year for the Rays and a really exciting one that, could bring impact on both sides of the ball, which is always something for teams like this that, really need that.
Yeah. If you're on the podcast, I want to read off basically the tweet that we posted on the video, which is if you look at the shortstops who've hit 20 plus homers in the minors, age 21 or younger, that's a really good list. Carson Williams now on that list. That's like Ellie De La Cruz, Fernando Tatis Jr., Xander Bogaerts, Bobby Witt Jr. These are top end players. It is hard to be a shortstop who hits 20 plus homers in the minors at that kind of age. Doesn't mean it's a slam dunk 100% of the time you're going to turn into a star, but the stars who are stars in the big leagues are the ones who kind of do this. Williams has done that. Williams has shown performance in the upper levels of the minors, has been in Double A basically all year. At the upper level of the minors, as a true shortstop who has power, that's the kind of combination that you can't help but get excited about.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to in the Rays system right now. So let's take you to the Yankees system next, Jeff. And on the downside, Spencer Jones, who we were able to meet, the shirt that you're wearing at the prospect pad, great kid, big kid, right? Initially, you're getting judge comps just based on the size, and another guy that big coming up to the show who's super athletic eventually, and an outfielder. But there is some swing and miss that people have been worried about. And, he's now hit 200 strikeouts, setting a Yankees minor league record, I believe it is. Yeah, most strikeouts ever by a Yanks minor leaguer. There's the tweet. And it's not a record that you want. So long term, Yanks fans want to know what the concern level should be, and is that fixable?
Yeah, I think it's fixable to a degree. There's always going to be swing and miss, a longer levered player. I think he's very passive, so there's always going to be more strikeouts with guys that just take more pitches. You're going to get more calls, good or bad, on the fringe, the edges of the zone. Typically, players like that are a little bit less aggressive in zone, which will lead to taking some cookies down the middle of the plate. And I think we see that with Spencer Jones. But the bottom really fell out this year in terms of the contact. It was sort of at a level that you could say, all right, like maybe this guy's a 28, 29% strikeout rate guy, but he's also going to walk 13% of the time. And he has that big power, and he can play all three outfield positions, and he runs really well, especially for a big player. So there's a lot of tools here. The other thing I think too is with these bigger players, these taller hitters, and it happened with Judge, though it wasn't to this extreme of a degree in terms of the strikeouts. We're looking at players that, when you're this big, it does take a little bit longer for everything to come together. I just think that the peak years, when he finally sort of breaks through, it might be a little bit older than we hoped. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of Yankees prospects that had big skill sets and big tools like this that haven't necessarily put it all together, even with some prospect hype and pedigree. Esteban Florial is one that even a few years ago, we were talking to scouts that still believed that he could be an MLB regular and an above average one at that. That didn't come to fruition. I don't think it's quite that bad with Spencer Jones, but it is concerning. There are things to like, but at the same time, the strikeout rate is what the strikeout rate is. And the number of strikeouts he's put together in a full season at Double A, and the fact that he didn't get a promotion this year to Triple A, which is something that I think coming into the season, we all anticipated that, this player, even if things go kind of poorly, probably sees, Scranton Wilkes-Barre by August. That wasn't the case. And I think you have to sort of take a step back, take a look at it, and sort of say, all right, like how much of this swing and miss is really going to be a really limiting factor of him getting to those tools, him getting to that power, him getting to that speed, and some of the other things that he does really well that can impact the game and make him a really exciting player. I just think he's behind a few other players in the pecking order right now.
I think you look at it, it has to be an inflection point for him. It's over 36% strikeout rate this year. You cannot succeed in the big league. You do not succeed in the big leagues if you're striking out 36% of the time in Double A. There's not a translation where you say, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and it's going to work in the big leagues if you're already striking out that much in Double A. The key thing for him is this is not a year he wants to repeat. He doesn't want to repeat Double A next year either, obviously. This has to be kind of the step forward where next year, okay, some changes, some adjustments to make more contact, because that is a derailing flaw if he can't fix it. You're hoping it's a 1 year kind of, it was a derailment. You get the train back on the tracks and you keep going down towards the journey. But right now it's got to get better, because there are just not examples of guys striking out at this rate who then go on to big league success without making improvement. Ellie De La Cruz has always had strikeout issues, but we saw it get better and better. And his was hovering at at a level significantly below what Spencer Jones is now.
Okay. And let's finish with this. We have one fan question we'll get to. We went long today, especially at the top with some critical topics. So let's finish with this. Fogel, to put it lightly. Hi, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on J.J. Weatherholt's stats at low A ball. Were the Cardinals too conservative with his assignment? Should we take the small sample size with a grain of salt?
I'll start, and I want to hear what Jeff says too. But I'll say, yeah, I mean, it's very good. He's been great. He's been really good. You don't even have to take small sample size. But I have to say, like, the fact that he's been able to hit at the Florida State League, yes, I expected 100% that. A guy who was the Division I batting champ 2 years ago, the Florida State League is kind of going to be easy for him. Now, this is just getting him acclimated. You can obviously move him a lot faster next year. Quinn Matthews, speaking of that organization, if the Cardinals came from Stanford, they started him this year at low A. You turn around, he's at triple A. It's not like you can't speed up the process going along. But yeah, I'm not going to I think you're right to not get too overexcited also over a guy who has a long and distinguished college career performing in low A at the end of a season, because the reality of it is he's facing a lot of guys who are significantly younger, significantly less experienced than him.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things we do need to keep in mind with a lot of these teams, with low A complex teams, low A teams that are right next to their complexes and their facilities, there is some value, especially with a player that's had some nicks and bruises and some soft tissue injuries throughout his career, of keeping him around their best training staff and their best facilities. I do think there's some of that where it's like, do we need to necessarily send this guy up to the Midwest League? Do we really need to challenge this guy, as opposed to having him, part of that culture, around that clubhouse, around more coaches, around more resources within the facilities, et cetera, that they have access to. I believe they have a traject machine down there as well, based on my conversations with Brendan Donovan talking about his usage of the traject. So I know that there might be some reasons that they kept him there, just simply from a development standpoint, and we're less concerned. And it's more like, hey, next year, maybe they do skip the Midwest League entirely and send him to the Texas League out the gates. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. They also kept Chase Davis, who did struggle a little bit, and I know was working on some adjustments in terms of his swing path and where his hands were and how that sort of worked. They kept him there for a really long time, even when he was productive, and then kept him in high A for a very short period of time, and then was up in Springfield, and now, of course, is in double A. So I think we're seeing a little bit of a pattern here with this organization that, maybe they don't necessarily want to send everybody out to Peoria, and especially at the beginning of the season, which is what I think the issue was with Quinn Matthews, which is why I think we might see Weatherholt skip high A entirely. It wouldn't shock me if he just breaks camp with Springfield next year and they say, hey, we have a guy with soft tissue injuries and some of these things that have happened. Is it really worth sending him to one of the hardest places, I would argue probably the hardest hitting environment in all of minor league baseball, which is the Midwest League, and just send him to double A, where we know he's going to probably be up there by May minimum anyway. So I think there's some of that at play. Of course, they made the playoffs. They're playing some games tonight. He's been really productive and has showed out in the playoffs, had a home run in the first game, that series against Daytona, and has had back-to-back 3-hit games and been way up top in the hot sheet in consecutive weeks now.
Yeah, and I know Cardinals fans were very pumped when he dropped down there. There was a chance, guys, right? He could have gone number one, even.
Yeah,
he talked about. Yeah. So for Cardinals fans, they're like, wait, what? We're picking 7, and we ended up with J.J. Weatherholt. So we'll see what happens. Great question. And, of course, we'll hit questions every week. Thanks for joining us today. Of course, hope you enjoyed the topics today, especially at the top there with the White Sox and the Dodgers to really dive in. We'll do a lot of that in the offseason. Make sure you get yourself a Baseball America subscription. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, podcast, the whole deal. You can ask questions live every week. We will see you next week, 3 o'clock Eastern, same day on Hot Sheet.